What's up, everyone? Welcome to Akuma Industries, and today we are discussing the Hure German. Well, yeah, we'll go with German pilot's wristwatch. So for a very long time, by the way, this is World War II. Wow, that intro was just terrible. Germany, right before World War II, was heavily focusing on its aviation industry, building civilian planes. Maybe kind of secretly building, maybe not even building civilian planes really, but researching and manufacturing and developing the industry to create planes in general. A lot of this was a lot of it was very secret because after the Versailles Treaty, it wasn't allowed to have an air force. But in 1935, Hitler announced the Luftwaffe and its creation. So, along with all this aviation buildup, they needed a wristwatch that could go along with the new pilots that were coming in 1936, 1937, 1938, 1939, and onwards during the war. So the Reich's Luftfahrtministerium, the aviation research wing of Germany wanted a wristwatch for their pilots. So there we go. And the standard criteria was this: must be 55 millimeters, automatic pocket watch. It had to be an automatic and allowed pocket watch size movements. It had the brigade balance spring, movement surrounded by an iron core so that it would be anti-magnetic. It needed to have hacking, of course. It had to have an oversized crown. Obviously, when you're a pilot, you have these giant gloves. And it did have a double riveted strap, and that was long enough to go over a flight jacket. I'll put a picture up of a double riveted strap here or here, and let's continue. These watches were huge. I'll say it again. I said it earlier. 55 millimeters. Can you imagine a watch that large? Even the big gaudy watches of the mid 2000s were never ever 55 millimeters, like gigantic. And when people say that, like, you have a dinner plate on your wrist, literally this watch looks like that. So sorry for all those vintage collectors out there, you're gonna look like a complete idiot walking around the street with this watch on. There was two models, the Type A and the Type B. I think the Type B model had some slight variations to the inner of the dial, but for the most part, they kept the same. This wristwatch was super legible and needed to be, because when these pilots were going around doing missions, they didn't look at their wristwatch and tell immediately what it was. These watches were owned by the Luftwaffe, not by the pilots. So whenever these pilots would fly missions, at the very end of the mission, they'd have to give it back to the Luftwaffe along with their plane. So I thought that was interesting. And how they figured out the time was a light would flash on an airbase. Or, I think so. I'm not for sure if they would fly over the airbase or when they were launching, they would check, or right before their flight. But Germany had a standardized time system, and it was definitely up to par with the other nations at the time, obviously, because the Germans were research heavy, they were industry heavy. They were produced by Lange, Wempe, Laco, Stowa, and IWC. So 4 German companies and 1 Swiss company. Lange and Wempe were the only ones to use German movements. Because they were in-house, right? They used in-house movements. They're German companies, so therefore they would be German movements. And this wristwatch has many homages. You know what? Before we get into that, I would like to just give a little brief overview on the German aviation during World War II. So you had a huge build-up, the launch, and the Luftwaffe is a modern fighting air force. They do very well in Poland, do very well in France. However, during the Battle of Britain, lots of their planes get wiped out. And from that point on, they really played a minimal role in in German in Germany from then on had a lower role in the air after the Battle of Britain. When they invaded the Soviet Union, yes, the Luftwaffe played a huge role in doing things like supply drops for the soldiers stopped in Stalingrad, close air support, battling with the Soviet pilots. I mean, German aces of the war had insane amounts of kills, or I don't want to say kills, successes, victories, some shooting over 300 planes down, like, blows my mind. And that's due in part to the fact that Luftwaffe, their pilots never got a break at all during the war. Other pilots would get shifted out and whatnot. So keep that in mind. The men who wore, I think maybe a few women. I swear there was a small contingent of women in the Air Force, in the Luftwaffe, but most, yeah, the men who wore these wristwatches, they were no joke. Luftwaffe pilots were among the best in the world. They had the best plane. For a while, I would say they had some high-end planes. They had a lot of training, and they built up a really strong Air Force, even with the Treaty of Versailles suppressing the German industry for a very long time. So, the homages. I'm not even gonna bring up the vintage, because you're not gonna find them, and if you do, they're gonna be expensive. But homages. Stoa makes an homage. Laco makes an homage. I believe both of them are 42, 43 millimeters, so a bit big for me, but for the most people, they should be fine. And my personal, if I was trying to get this wristwatch and I wanted to enjoy it, I would go with the Seiko SNK 5. Seiko SNK, Seiko 5. Sorry about that. It's a Seiko 5. It's called the Seiko SNK. It has the same layout, classic military layout, and a much smaller form factor, militaristic in its design. And I would say that it's a great substitute for anyone who wants to kind of, it doesn't pretend to be a pilot's wristwatch, but it has the same dial layout. But if you want to go get the homage, the Stoa and Laco, carry them. Yep, and that will, I think, one more video about wristwatches in World War II. The wristwatches I laid out, the A11, the Dirty Dozen, the Kamikaze, and then now the Behur. These were the common wristwatches of World War II. These are the ones that people, I don't know, maybe not they weren't common, but they had the most information on. They're easiest to find. You just search up World War II wristwatches, and these ones come up. I've been looking into more rarer wristwatches that Germany had during the war, and I'll be making a separate video on that. But I'd like to go a little bit in depth. The German infantry, they had a huge assortment of variety of wristwatches, because with the pilots and the Kamikaze wristwatches, it's very easy for us to go, okay, this is specifically a Kamikaze wristwatch because it's from the era, blah 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 blah. It was worn by a pilot. It has all the serial codes and whatever, right? Dirty Dozen, very obvious. Look at the serial codes, what companies produced it, what is the dollars on, blah blah blah. For a lot of the warring nations, the soldiers had their own personal wristwatches. So you can have a World War II wristwatch that might have been a pocket watch conversion that was handed down from their father or something. Could have been just, maybe he was 18, bought a wristwatch, oh crap, 3 years later, World War II starts, he's joining in the army. So I'm going to make a video more in depth about that. Thank you very much for watching my video about the Behur. My family's coming home. Thank you very much for watching. Akuma out.